Howdy, folks, and welcome to your storm chasing forecast show for Tuesday, July 28th. I cannot believe we are almost already to the end of July. It seems like storm chasing
hmm
season just began yesterday. I'm Gabriel Harbor. He's Cameron Nixon. How you doing tonight, my friend?
I'm doing just dandy. No animal issues or anything else of that matter. So I've been doing well.
Yeah, man, you've been under duress these last couple of shows with the live stream and the forecast show, so I'm just glad to hear you're
Yeah,
having a regular old evening.
everything's peachy.
Copacetic, he says. Everything's
Yes.
going well. And we, of course, are today recording after an anomalous event occurred over
hmm
in Wisconsin. That was a pretty crazy daytime tornado that I don't think anybody saw coming.
Yeah, not myself included. Admittedly, I walked into this at the end of my forecast yesterday with just the extreme amount of cam variability. It was just like throwing a dart at, I don't know, a dartboard a mile away. It's like good luck. Hindsight's 2020. I may have been able to sniff out that kind of regime. I think what happened in a nutshell was you had these kind of pseudo elevated storms that didn't quite grow upscale into an MCS. Maybe it was too dry aloft and maybe forcing was too weak. And so you had a couple of these quasi elevated HP storms and just get nudged in just the right fashion and just start really ripping from the surface. And of course, we had that strong low level shear and that strong low level buoyancy, and that's all it took for a very rapid tornado genesis from those storms. But definitely a non classic evolution, and one that I really don't fault many folks for missing. I'm always hard on people, including myself. So maybe we do better.
Yeah, and real quick, did this have anything you think to do with your frictional vorticity that you were discussing on yesterday's show?
It's really hard to pinpoint any influence in particular, but I do know that shear was probably a little stronger on all fronts than what we noticed from cams and models. So it's possible.
Do all fronts include, drumroll please, WeatherFront, which we have up in
Yes,
front
it
of us
does.
right now?
God, that was diabolical.
So, Cameron, if you want to maybe go over the high level overview for the setup using that wonderful there WeatherFront browser app, that would be awesome.
Yes, sir. Yeah, today is going to feature a broad slight risk over pretty much DC area down to the Virginias and the Carolinas with a 5% tornado risk. Virginia Beach down to Raleigh. I loved my time in Virginia Beach. I was at the Severe Local Storms Conference, which I'm actually going to be at in a week from now. So that'll be pretty fun. If you don't see me for a week or so, that'll be because of that, but a pretty broad area of storm chances, and a lot of people live and chase here. So I figured I'd go over what to expect out of today. And I guess my high level thinking is that there could be a maybe messy mode close to the low pressure system kind of evolution up here, where you could get some brief supercells mixed in with a lot of linear segments, maybe some shelf clouds, awesome skyline shots of storms rolling in, that kind of thing. Whereas you get a pretty steep drop off toward more dry convection down to the south. That's just my hunch. Maybe some LPs, maybe some storms that really struggle to even become supercells, but with a continued tornado threat down here. And we'll talk about that soon.
Awesome. Cannot wait to hear the forecast analysis. Before we jump into that too deep, though, I already foreshadowed it. This is the WeatherFront app that you've got up in front of you. Anybody who is not using it is living under a rock at this point. So check out that link in the description. There's a 7-day free trial if you've never downloaded it before. And if you get it on mobile, you get access on the browser app, on the desktop app. So you'll be able to use the very same tool you're about to watch Cameron break it down with. I'm really interested, Cameron, because these types of setups on the East Coast, it always seems like a race against how long the storms have before they form and then move off into the Atlantic Ocean. So
Absolutely.
we're
Yeah.
really interested to see how much runtime people might have if they are storm chasing today.
Let's get into it. As we've had the last forever how long, we're again dealing with a northwest flow weather pattern. And again, this really strong upper level low here over the East Coast is helping drive this really strong jet stream. We've actually dealt with several of these East Coast setups this year, and this one doesn't look any less potent. I think this one actually looks fairly robust, especially for this time of year and the area. And so if we look at our 700 millibar pattern, you see we have just this broad shortwave trough here ejecting into the mid-Atlantic and southeast here over the day. Might arrive in Appalachia just around noontime and then kind of continue going down southeast. Maybe some embedded shortwaves here, but everything kind of pinwheeling around this low pressure. Maybe a little bit lower. This is kind of where my ears start to perk up at around 850. We're dragging this kind of 850 flow field down throughout this area. Some fairly strong winds just off the deck, 30 to 40 knots, maybe even higher up towards the low pressure system here. And if you go down toward your surface, you can see that low pressure system just a little bit better. And you see just general recovery east of the Appalachians. And this is pretty much going to serve as our warm sector today. And if you look at our dew points, we're dragging all that ridiculous moisture from yesterday down into this area later on. And then, of course, we're advecting more from the Atlantic Ocean here. So pretty good look, I actually think, for dew points in this kind of corridor here, and even on the Appalachian Mountains from this kind of remnant pool here from yesterday. So all of this will contribute to really the fact that moisture probably will not be much of an issue as it has the last few kind of setups. What I think could be an issue is a kind of imbalance in forcing and how much moisture we have. We have a lot of forcing, much stronger forcing up here near the low. And as you'll see in a couple soundings we'll pluck, we have very deep moisture here. And so that's going to help assist in robust convective development, maybe a little bit too much. And then as we go down here toward the base of this kind of cold front here, you see our cold frontal forcing is actually fairly weak. We don't really have a really sharp wind shift here. Our air aloft is a little bit drier. So let me actually pluck a couple soundings to show you what I mean by this. We'll kind of go into the DC metro area and take a look at what we're dealing with there. And this is just the Dixie Alley special here, 77 over 73, deep, moist saturation here. Nice clockwise turning photographs, which is why I think we could definitely have a tornado threat up this way. But just a lot of potential for proliferating convection. And one of my kind of, I guess you could say, cheat codes to understand how much convection is possible is the depth of our effective inflow layer. Because what this is telling us is how deep is a layer where we can get convection in with just a tap of a cold pool or some kind of synoptic scale lift. And the deeper this is, the more opportunities you have to lift parcels from the surface all the way up to 3 kilometers. These deeper effective inflow layers are always better for more convection to proliferate, more cold pools, more MCSs. So not entirely an awesome look for discrete supercells. However, that photograph obviously says otherwise. So we'll have to pay attention to that. And then maybe as we work our way down the cold front, maybe just a little bit later, we'll pluck a couple soundings around Tennessee. And you see a little bit of a different story. Our moist layer is a little bit shallower, and we have much more dry air aloft. Our photographs still look pretty decent. This is a weird inverted second quarter photograph here. But still, you have sizable low-level shear and sizable mid-level shear, and that's pretty much all I look for supercell potential with tornadoes. And I think I plucked some soundings from other models, not the wrap, that were even drier aloft. And this is where we start getting into these issues where we may not even be able to maintain supercellular convection if we get this dry. But we'll look at more of these kind of simulations later. Maybe I will show kind of a NAM 3 kilometer look, just as maybe a sanity check as to what our environment will be looking like. Again, we'll pluck earlier near the low. I already see some convective activity going on near the DC Metroplex. This is definitely contaminated, but similar kind of idea here. Much deeper low-level moisture, a lot more saturation here. I'm going to keep plucking these dang contaminated soundings. And then just a fairly nice curvature to our photograph here. So it would not be surprising in this regime to have storms go up and immediately become supercellular, even with some tornado threat. So it's going to be really hard, though, to keep a supercell lasting very long, though, because of the potential for this environment to produce more convection. And then as we work our way south-southeast, maybe we can pluck a sounding somewhere, maybe just south of the Appalachians here. And again, you get that signal for much drier air here. The NAM in particular has a much shallower moist layer here. And so that's going to make it pretty difficult for convection. Maybe we pluck a couple kind of around the Appalachians here. Maybe storms start in the higher terrain. And you get a similar story. This is great for photogenic LP convection here. You even got some strong low level shear and deep layer shear. So would not be entirely surprised to see rotating storms here. Maybe they produce some hail, maybe even a brief tornado or two. They'll probably be pretty LP. But one thing that I actually did really like about this, and this might help me focus where our hypiest soundings are, if you will, is 3 kilometer Cape. And we have a lot of that in really both regimes here, the DC and the Pennsylvania regime, and then our kind of Appalachian regime. And some of these soundings near the Appalachian Mountains were pretty intense. Let me pluck one that's maybe a little bit more reasonable. Yeah, this is kind of what I was seeing earlier. Yeah, again, fairly shallow moisture here and really dry air loft. I think this is going to really inhibit upscale growth and maybe even supercell development. Decent low-level curvature, but otherwise just a fairly straight photograph with weaker mid-level shear. And then we can pluck another sounding just for posterity. Honestly, something like this, I would not be surprised to see tornadoes from. This is a ripping low-level Cape environment. You have almost 400 surface-based 3 Cape with this kind of sounding. So actually pretty ridiculous. It's just, can we actually sustain convection in this environment? You even see some semblance of kind of a capping inversion here. Things just don't look, about my pattern recognition, it's just not exactly liking this for sustained storms. But we'll have to see.
And one thing all of you will have to see is that join button down below the video, because that is how you become a member of our channel. We would greatly appreciate it if you would give it a thought or two as you're watching these videos tonight or any other night. It's the best way to let us know that you support what we're doing, and it keeps Cameron coming back. So if you like him, look at that face. You're really going to let him walk away? No, stop it. Stop. All right, folks. I got some questions for Cameron, so let's go ahead and get to them. First one is the higher terrain storms that you were talking about right off of the Appalachian Mountains, how that higher elevation might be where they start. Is there any chance that the valleys coming down off the Appalachians could have that tunneling effect, and that might be where a storm chaser would want to target if they were looking for maybe a storm to intensify?
Yeah, it's possible. I'm really not very well versed as to like which side of the slope exactly you need to be. But a trend I've been noticing in cams, or it's just all models though, is a greater amount of buoyancy aloft in these higher terrain. And I'm wondering if it's because you have a lot of our moisture is coming from up north, and perhaps it makes its way onto the mountains, but then you get this drying as it goes east of there, and then you get this kind of subsidence warming and maybe a little bit higher LCLs. I think some of the soundings we're plucking here are just a little bit warmer and drier on the lee side of the mountains, whereas on kind of the windward side, you have a lot more low-level moisture and more low-level instability. So I would almost consider the opposite. I would almost rather be on the windward side of these Appalachians, or right kind of on top of them. But obviously, I don't think there's much precedent for that for tornadic activity. I wouldn't be chasing the top of the Appalachians.
Isn't there a big area as well in West Virginia, kind of bleeding into parts of Virginia, where there's just no cell phone service because it's like a government blackout zone?
I don't know much about the government blackout zone, but I was making a chaseability map, and pretty much every way I sliced it, West Virginia was just dark red. Do not go here.
Yeah, do not leave.
Yeah.
It's actually really interesting because about 45 minutes to the southeast of where I live, like if you actually take your cursor and put it over there by Columbus, and then you just go a little bit to the southeast of Columbus, that area right there is the foothills of the Appalachian Mountains. Like when I step outside, if I get the right view, I can actually see the mountains beginning off in the distance. And it's like another planet. 45 minutes down the road, it goes from being like actually pretty awesome chaseable terrain with wide open fields and farms if you get outside of the major city areas, to being absolutely unchaseable. You can't see a damn thing. And so I can only imagine as you get deeper into it in West Virginia and whatnot, down by Ohio University in Athens, that it's a no-go.
I'm sure these local chasers here have their perches, but for us plains folk and Midwest folk, our minds just can't comprehend.
Very good, sir. All right, I figure we might as well get on with it. It's been looming in the background since we started this forecast. It's
Always
time
has
for
been.
you to battle the convection allowing models. Cam versus Cams, take
Yes.
it away.
And I definitely lost yesterday. I did. I was ill prepared. I did not have the defense to go up against my opponent, the HER or the RFS or anything for that matter. But let's just take a look at general convective evolution from these models just to see if they roughly follow what we were thinking of before. And HER at least looking like about what we were expecting. Lots of forcing up here for storms and convection. Something we didn't really talk about was how much convection would be around to the south earlier on in the day, but that should exit us pretty quickly. And I just see this proliferation of convection, even some discrete warm sector stuff, maybe some supercells if you imagine it here, and then some squall lines. DC gets a good shelf cloud, and then that's pretty much it for this area before everything kind of takes off the shoreline. Not too much in the way of convection off the Appalachians and southward here, even though we were plucking some pretty gnarly looking thermodynamic soundings. So I think this is perhaps a signal of maybe that really dry air loft and weak mid-level shear really not doing any favors for supercell development. We could look at the Rufus and see what we're doing earlier on in the day. Again, has that just really messy regime here with some around here. So if you're a bay chaser here, you might have some fun here before things start spouting off in the Atlantic here. And again, not too much hope. Maybe a couple supercells down here by Charlotte, but not much hope along this kind of cold frontal feature. So again, a common theme here amongst the cams. Then we look at the NAM. Also has that kind of early morning stuff. And this early morning stuff is important. I remember the Wisconsin day where you had those LPs about a week ago. And this convection can actually exacerbate that dry air and that subsidence behind it. So this convection might actually be a reason why the Appalachians are so timid and unwilling to convect along that cold front, is because of this kind of previous convection here. But it looks like our DC down to Richmond is still our best opportunity for storms. Maybe some nice shelf clouds all the way down to Virginia Beach. That'd be pretty spicy. And then again, maybe just some weak signal for prefrontal supercells that again might actually become tornadic pretty quickly in these kind of environments. So definitely do not disagree with SPC's 5% and their placement. Would not be surprised to see a couple, even a few tornadoes. Just what mode they're in is anyone's guess.
I have one final question for you. It
Yes,
came to
sir.
mind when you were talking about the storms spouting off into the Atlantic Ocean. I'm not
Yes.
sure about the physics of it, but is it possible to have an EF5 waterspout that's entirely over the ocean? Has that ever been observed? Is it even possible?
Man, with some of those spouts that I know the enthusiasts could probably pluck out of the ether, I'm sure there's been some very violent water spouts off here. I would just think you need a very specific profile for those. You would need your water to be the warmest thing in the entire column. And I think actually what some of these soundings that we're looking at, that might actually be the case. Maybe if you pluck one just off the shore and this high dew plume, look at that. Yeah, so it wouldn't surprise me. It would just have to be a very specific water is the warmest thing in that layer. Got a lot of low level cape here. And then, of course, a supercell to take advantage of
All right, no more dumb questions. Are we good?
that. Yeah, that's good though.
I spared you from the conversation I had with J-Jack tonight in office hours. So somehow we got on the topic of if you could go back in history and change one thing, yeah, it would probably be moral to go back and change something that would lead to World War II or World War One or something like that.
Well,
But I
sure.
actually think I'm leaning more at this point towards I'd go back to the strongest tornado during like the time of the dinosaurs because I want to
Yeah.
watch like a T-Rex get lofted by like an EF Jurassic tornado, just yeeted off. Remember to check out those links in the description below and then watch another video.